My name is Mary Foster, and I'm traveling with Mr. Abdelrazik for the last week. We're both coming from Montreal, and we're on a speaking tour. This part of the speaking tour is being sponsored by the Canadian Labour Congress, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Canadian Auto Workers, and the Canadian Union of Postal Workers. And frankly, we're here to call for people to support this campaign, which we think is important not just for as a matter of solidarity for our community member, but as well as something that will eventually and does affect many of us now and will eventually affect all of us if we don't stand up to this kind of trend. Abousfian Abdelrazik was arrested in Sudan in 2003 while he was on a visit. He was never charged with anything at all. He was threatened, he was beaten, and he was tortured during 2 periods of detention, which totaled almost 2 years. Later on, he discovered that he was initially arrested at the request of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, that's CSIS, which is Canada's spies. His lawyers obtained some internal, confidential government memos that showed that CSIS had actually requested that he be detained by the Sudanese. In the first few months of his custody, 2 CSIS agents traveled from Canada to Sudan and interrogated him while he was in Sudanese custody. This is called outsourcing torture, and this is not an isolated case. When he was released from prison finally, he was then repeatedly blocked by Canadian officials from returning to Montreal. And I say blocked, it wasn't just that he was stranded and Canada wasn't helping him. There were, again, through the Access to Information Act, his lawyers were able to obtain a lot of information that showed some correspondence between Canadian officials in Sudan and Canadian officials in Ottawa that clearly showed there were attempts to stop him from returning to Canada at that point. Shortly after his release from his second period of detention in 2006, he was informed that his name had been placed on what is known as the Al-Qaeda and Taliban list, an international terrorist list, which is also called the 1267 list. This does 2 things. It imposes an international travel ban. You can't travel from country to country. And it imposes a complete asset freeze. So you can no longer have any access to your property. You can't have a bank account. This listing, at that point, when he had just been released from prison, provided the pretext for the Canadian government for the following 3 years to block him from returning home to his family and his children here.
CSIS harassed me and my family. CSIS tried to buy my wife and to bargain with her, convincing her that I am not Canadian, I am a Sudanese, she is a Canadian. I'm supposed to comply with them and to give information about me. Then my wife, she told them, if you have a problem with this man, why you don't bring him to the court? A few months later, because my wife, she was sick with the cancer, she passed away. In the meantime, I received news from my mother in Sudan. She was sick. Now I am between 3 difficult situations: CSIS, loss of wife, mother sick in my country. I decided to go to see my mother, and before I left to Sudan, a few days before I left, 2 CSIS agents came to my home in Montreal and tried just to ask me where I'm going. Say this is my business, I don't want to share to somebody else. When they just pushed hard, I called the city police for them, and the police asked them to leave. While they walking away, one of them, he turned to me and said, "We know that you're going to Sudan and you will see." I went to Sudan. I took care of my mother. I visited some relative here and there. After 6 months, I planned to come back to Canada. Before a few days, I received a call from somebody claimed that he came from Saudi Arabia and mentioned the name of my nephew. He said he had a letter from my nephew. For me, it is normal because this person, he mentioned my nephew names and he claimed he had a letter from him. And he asked me just to meet him somewhere in the capital of Sudan, Khartoum. And it is normal thing. Just I went to this person, and the surprise is I find that person, it is a Sudanese security intelligence agents. Just they said to me, "Go with us for 15 minutes talk." I'm really scared and I panicked. Just and I asked question, what I did wrong? I did nothing wrong. Why you want to talk to me? Then one of them, he said, "Look, Abousfian, if you don't go, we have authorization to shoot you." And then just as I became more scared, and just like, "No, I don't want to go." Just one of them, he took his gun and pointed to me and asked me, this on the street, in the evening time, the people walking around, and he asked me just to lay down on the ground. Now, for me, it is serious. I went down, and they grabbed me from my shoulder. They put me in a car and drove away. We arrived in the Sudanese intelligence headquarters. They put me in a cell, 2.5 meters by 1.5 meters. It is very small. There is a desk in that room, 2 chairs in front and 1 chair in front of the desk and 2 behind the desk. They show me a pillow. They ask me without cover, without nothing, and they turn their condition on, and the room after the moment became very cold. I don't have no cover. I stayed 12 days. Nobody asked me nothing. Just imagine in this kind of situation what kind of fear is broken through me, and thinking and guessing what was going to happen, what wrong I did. 12 days. By the day 12th, by midnight, the door is opened. The 2 agents entered the room and they asked me to sit down in a chair. And one of them, the 2 agents, opened the door of that desk and asked questions from a paper inside the drawer, and all the questions about some Muslims people in Montreal and some names I never heard about.